Namaste and welcome to the Divas That Care Network. I'm your host, Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, our network is going into its 16th year and is listened to in over 30 countries. I'd like to personally thank you for giving me the gift of your time. As always, it is my honor to hold space with and for you. And today I am super stoked because we have a very dear friend of mine and a woman whose brain works in a way that mine will never have the capacity to. And so I am grateful to her for joining us today. The wonderful Ms. Susan Goodhand, CPA. So for all of the wonderful women out there who are entrepreneurs and wanting to start businesses, death and taxes is what I'm going to roll with. And Susan is here to give us her sage words of wisdom so that we can best prepare ourselves for the inevitable, which is going to be April of the upcoming year. So Susan, would you please share a little bit about your business, how you got started, and we'll dive into anything that might be able to help fellow female and male entrepreneurs because taxes are for everyone. They do not discriminate.
Taxes are for everyone, and they don't need to be terrifying. You can plan ahead and have your ducks in a row and be ready for tax time, as well as keeping your ducks in a row throughout the year helps you plan better for your tax business. Not your tax business, for your business.
Right.
So how I got started, I went to college and studied accounting, and I worked for a medium-sized regional firm for a bunch of years. And then I switched off to corporate accounting and did some, assistant controller work. But I always kind of kept my foot in the public accounting. And I have had a number of clients over the years, that I've had some of them for 30 years. And I just have always enjoyed helping people, especially helping to empower women in their businesses. And by keeping it simple and staying steady with what you're doing, you can understand what's needed and have the valuable information for your business. So for instance, say someone's just getting started in a business, you are going to need to determine if you're going to do an LLC, a C Corp, an S Corp, or just stay as a sole proprietor. And the main driver behind that really is a legal matter. And I'm an accountant, a CPA. I'm not an attorney.
A lawyer.
Right. I do know that, LLCs are very popular and they do afford protection. And they're a simpler way of getting that protection than becoming an S Corp or a C Corp. Obviously, if you have partners, you're going to need to look at things a different way than if you're just a sole proprietor. I'm going to assume that for the most part, most of the people that we're talking to today are just individuals that have a business that, maybe they have employees, maybe they have contract employees. That's actually saying it wrong. Contractors. Independent contractors.
Yeah. The 1099s of the world.
Yeah. We do have to be really careful about talking about employees versus independent contractors, because really the state of New Jersey is the agency who cares the most about that. And they're really looking out for the employees. They're looking to see if employers are skirting an issue of making someone an employee when, they don't want to carry workers' comp. They don't want to carry, they don't want to pay half of the Social Security and half of the Medicare and the New Jersey unemployment and disability. So it's really, you know, the state of New Jersey is the one who has the most to say about whether someone's a contractor or an employee.
Or right.
And it really comes down to a matter of control. Are you, like, say, for instance, you have a retail store and the retail store is open from, 9 to 5,
Yep.
and you need somebody to work from 9 to 1 o'clock every day. Well, you're exerting a fair amount of control over their schedule. You're exerting a fair amount of control over what they do. Say, for
Right.
instance, in my case, I have an accounting client and they say, I just want it done. They don't care when I do it, they don't care how I do it. They just want to know that it's done and that at the end of any particular period, we can look at the financial statements.
Right.
There's a
Right.
huge difference in those two scenarios I just described. So
Yes.
one is an independent contractor and one is a controlled employee.
Right.
Now, if you have an employee, or not, I keep misusing the word. If you have someone who works for you and they're paid on commission only, which is based on sales or some other measurable thing, which I can't imagine what else it would be other than sales,
Right.
um, you you don't necessarily exercise the same amount of control, you know, as an employee. So, you want to be careful how you set yourself up in
Right.
terms of when you're starting a business. And you want to keep it as simple as you can, but you also want to, stay legal. Now, the
And I would imagine also
IRS,
have some sense of consistency too, right? Like there's an
yeah,
element of, getting, I would imagine, lost in the weeds if if you're starting a business and you start to pick and choose a little bit which direction you're going to go. And it really makes the most sense to be a little more cohesive for
yeah,
your purposes. I'm assuming once people get to that point of reaching out to you, and for their own mental well-being as they're wrangling all the things that go into a business to start it out.
right. Well, I will say that for me, I have talked to so many people, and especially women, mostly women, but I've talked to so many people before they get started in a business. The time to really have these conversations is before you start your business.
Right.
And it doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to talk to someone for an hour and a half, even if they never use me as an accountant, just to have the conversations about, pitfalls and kind of what you need to consider in advance of starting a business.
Right.
Like
Because
insurance, for instance, whether you need to get, you know, general business insurance. Do you need your employees to be bonded? Is there a lot of cash? Is there, you know, concern of that? Do you need tenant insurance if you're renting a space? Do you have inventory? Do you need your inventory specifically insured? So it's
right.
really a matter of talking to all the professionals and finding out, what's needed, because, just a conversation is going to trigger other things that maybe as a new business owner someone wasn't thinking about.
Right.
But having the conversation, that's why when someone asks a tax question, it's almost always like, well, that depends. And I know that's not the answer anyone wants to hear, but it really does depend on the rest of your situation.
Right.
If you have nothing else except a business and your business is, doing well, fine, then that's all you have. But if you have a spouse who has a W-2, who
Right.
has no withholding, then all of a sudden, come the end of the year, you guys are going to have a tax bill.
Right.
If you have a lot of medical expenses one year, you could get a deduction for that. Um, it's there's just so many variables,
And so what
and
I'm hearing is it's very nuanced, obviously.
mhm,
And I think we all know that. I feel like that's just,
yeah, yeah,
like a captain obvious statement. But I think that, it's true. Like it's every taxes are as individual as literally almost anything, if
mhm,
not the most individualized thing, and they are completely situational. And so
yeah,
if you are, I know it's hard, and obviously, like we're talking, you and I are both in the state of New Jersey, but we're talking to people who may be in other countries. And obviously,
Right.
this is not going to be for everyone. So big disclaimer alert, if you're out of the state of New Jersey, then, some of
Some of
these are
this
going to
won't.
apply for federal only, right? But it's
Yeah.
still a good idea to talk about the startup of a business, getting your ducks in a row, making sure you
Mhm.
have professionals that you trust and can count on and are
Mhm.
reliable.
Mhm.
Because as you unfold the process and you kind of dive into it, what I've found trying to run my own business is essentially things become contingent. So one aspect can't be completed or ticked off the list of to do until this other aspect comes into play. And then
Mhm.
the conversation becomes, okay, well, once I talk to the insurance broker, then I have to have a conversation with my accountant, decide whether I'm going to move towards W-2 or 1099 and how that may affect your bottom line, which at the end of the day, unfortunately, the business is only truly there to make money because you're not going to be able to continue to run it effectively and help people or offer support or do whatever service or retail or whatever it is that you're providing. If you aren't making any money, you will no longer be able to do it. So unfortunately, we are in a capitalist society, and that is kind of I
The
don't remember the
reality.
movie it's from, but The Way the Cookie Crumbles, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's a Jim Carrey movie, but The Way the Cookie Crumbles.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd like to touch on if let's say you were talking to someone who's like, I want to start up a business. Are there any can we touch on the potential benefits and or maybe deterrence of an LLC versus an S corp versus a C corp for someone who's just starting out?
I mean, it really, everything that I've ever learned, read, etc. on it, it really comes down to your comfort level.
Got it.
Um, an LLC provides a corporate shell. I think that's an okay term, and gives you the protection of your personal assets.
Right.
And I mean, let's face it, it's a litigious world. And things happen, people
Right.
get hurt. Products don't work as intended. So, you know, I think I think for most people, they really are going with the LLC. It and again, it really depends on if you have more than one person in the business.
Got it. And why is that?
Well, because if if you have more than one person in the business, you're going to need to have agreements. You're going to need an operating agreement
Right.
that includes starting the business, running the business, and you really do want to talk about how the business might end. And by that, I
Right.
mean like the buying out one person of another. You
Right.
want to talk
Dissolution.
about that before you even get started because, you know, as time passes, people's expectations change. And you want to address a lot of that at the beginning so that
Right.
you can understand it. And depending on your relationship with the person you're going into business with, you might want to talk about how decisions are made. You know, are how much leeway does one person have, or does everything have to be, you know, a group decision? And
Right.
especially once you get into having more than one partner, if you have
Right.
three partners or more, allegiances form, and you just never really know. So, if you have a single member LLC, that is a disregarded entity for tax purposes, or I should say, can be, and mostly is. So you don't file a corporate tax return. You file a Schedule C if it's a regular business. You would file a Schedule C in your 1040 tax return. Um, if you have more than one member, you're going to have to choose up and either be a partnership or an S Corp or a C Corp, but obviously a C Corp wouldn't be an LLC.
Right.
Um, and then if you're an S Corp, one of the big pitfalls of an S Corp people don't realize is that they have to pay themselves a salary, a W-2
Interesting.
salary. You can't take draw if you're an S corp.
Got it.
And that's the law. Like that's the IRS code.
Okay.
So, um, and again, I'm not really sure. I haven't really done a lot of international stuff. I've done some, but I don't know about an international business, how they would go about that.
Right, filing within the US. Very interesting. So basically, if I'm an LLC and I want to pay myself, the money coming in is mine to do with as I please, as opposed to an S corp where, let's say, so what would happen if I decided I wanted to be an S corp and I started my operating agreement and I said, okay, as a partner, as the main person in the S corp, I'm going to pay myself, $10,000 a month, let's just say. And then we start doing gangbusters and I want to increase my pay rate. Is that, how does that unfold or unpack with regard
That's,
to,
I don't think that's a big deal. You just do
okay,
it. You
okay.
know, you would
You
have to
just
come,
make
you have to have
amendments.
an agreement. And when I say an agreement, I mean like just a conversation. And you might
Yes.
want to document it in, meeting notes. It's not a
Got it.
bad idea to document things in meeting notes. But say you just have one partner, one business partner, and one of you has a full-time job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the person who's most working the business is doing well, so it makes sense to give that person an increase in their salary. I mean,
Right.
that makes perfect sense. There's no reason that you wouldn't do that. They were willing to work for less until the business became successful, but now that the business is successful, they want to be paid. And you can also pay, the other partner for their contributions to
Right.
the business. Um, you just have to be in agreement.
Right. Okay.
It has to
Interesting.
be a reasonable for an S corp. It has to be a reasonable salary.
Okay.
Like you can't pay somebody $10,000 a year to work 40 hours a week.
Right.
But if
Right.
the business doesn't have the money, the business doesn't have the money. So
Right. Circling back to the nature of business, and if you no matter what offer, what service you provide, if you're not making money at the end of the day, you're not going to be providing much of anything. So
yeah, yeah,
that is the reality that we live in. So okay, good to know. And so if you are, let's say, starting off on your own, an LLC is probably not the worst idea for just an added layer of protection. It
yeah.
won't really make much of an effect on your taxes other than the addition of a Schedule C, but you're
Mm-hmm,
still filing as an individual,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
And it kind of it helps. And then you should also, if we're having that conversation, then the LLC should have its own bank account. So let's talk a little bit about the preparation, like you said, for yourself and for
Yeah.
us as the business owners to kind of stay organized, keep on top of our own data as the year goes on. And I'm horrible about this, but so let's use me
Okay.
as the example
So,
of what not to do.
well,
But
ideally,
you should keep your
I
expenses for your business separate, right?
yes.
Like, and different credit card or different account
Yep.
debit,
Yep.
keep track separate from
Mm-hmm,
your personal.
mm-hmm. So ideally, when you open a new business, you want to open a new bank account and you want to get yourself a credit card and you want to exclusively use that for the business. You want to deposit all your revenue, all your income. And so many businesses now take the card. So you just link the credit card processor to your bank account. And then when you need to pay yourself, so to speak, you would just take the money out of that account. And and by that I mean you don't swipe for this or that. Take a draw. Take $1,000 a week, $1,000 a month, 2,000, whatever you need and whatever the business supports. And you write a check out to yourself, Gia. Um, and you say, may draw. And then you take that check and you deposit it in your personal account and you do whatever you want with it. It has nothing to do with the business. So when you take a draw like that, that's a balance sheet item. So instead of it being a business expense, it's technically it's going to become income on your Schedule C. It's going to
Okay.
remain as income on your Schedule C. And that's how your income gets reported. So at the end of the year, if there's money left in the business and your draw, that's really your income for the year that you would most likely pay self-employment tax on, which is Social Security, self-employment tax, and then personal income tax for federal and personal income tax for the state.
Okay.
My ideally, someone would be able to use something like QuickBooks, or there's a number of programs. Xero. If you're really intricate and complicated, you would buy, oh my gosh, I'm having a brain drain about what they're even called because I haven't been in one in so long.
One of them's TurboTax, right? That's a big one. Like
Well,
Intuit
no, this
TurboTax, or
is,
no?
TurboTax may have a bookkeeping module. I don't know, but
Okay.
QuickBooks and Xero, and I can't even think of all of them, because QuickBooks is just, I hesitate to call it the gold standard because it's really a love-hate relationship with QuickBooks.
Of course it is.
Yeah, of course it is. But one of the really nice things about QuickBooks is that you can have a couple of users, and it's mostly people are using the online version, and you can access it from anywhere. Again, you can link your bank accounts to it, your credit card to it. It does the downloads. You set up rules. It accepts your transactions. And with not a lot of effort, you've got a pretty robust financial statement. It's really, again, gold standard isn't the right word, but it's very widely used.
Okay.
It also has pitfalls, one of them being that I find it to be a little expensive for a small
Okay.
business. I think it's about $75. They might have like an entry level amount, but I think it's about $75 a month, which is a little prohibitive. So the
Yeah.
other thing that I find works and helps with clients that have not a crazy amount going on, is at the end of the year or periodically throughout the year, I'll meet with them. We'll go into their bank account on their computer, and I'll do a download of the activity into a Google Doc, a simple Google Doc. And
Okay.
then we mark everything that's revenue. We mark, everything that's an expense. We would call it rent. We would call it, I don't know, utilities, supplies, whatever you have for your expenses.
Yeah.
Your contractor employees. I keep saying that. I keep doing it wrong. Your
Independent
contractors
contractors or your employees.
or
Yeah.
your
Your
employees.
W-2s or your
Yeah,
1099s.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And then you go from there, and you have a clear picture. Now, if you get a credit card, you would also do the same thing for the credit card. At some point during the year, you would go onto your credit card account, you would download the activity, and you would summarize it. And then come the end of the year, you have all the details that you need to do your taxes. Now, for some people, this is like a crazy foreign idea. For me, if I sit down with you and we download your bank activity, and then with you, or you tell me what everything is, or put it in yourself, it takes me like 20 minutes. Whereas if you're going to get out the paper and the pencil, you're going to be there forever trying to figure it out.
Hours.
It's just
Yeah.
it's easier to do these downloads. And again, if you're a big enough business, you're going to need something like QuickBooks
Of course.
or Xero, or I can't again think of the word, a general ledger package, something like that. But I feel like most of the people we're talking to are relatively small businesses. If you are going to have payroll, I highly recommend using a payroll company, not using a QuickBooks payroll company, the payroll
Okay.
company at QuickBooks, just using, either ADP, Paychex, Gusto. There's a couple more that are pretty popular. And the main reason is that while it's an expensive proposition to use them, all you have to do is make one mistake in doing your payroll, and you will have spent more than that fixing it and the penalties for not
Right.
paying them on time. So it really is worth it. And
Okay.
you can call paychecks. I don't really love that company. You can call ADP and you can get a pretty sweet deal on processing
Interesting.
your payroll. Um, and again, with the credit card, you get a credit card and you really only use it for your business.
Right.
And then you don't have to think about if when I went to, I don't know, Home Depot and bought something, was it to make a small repair at the studio, or was it, because I needed a new lock on my front door at home? If
Right.
you stick to the rules, then it's just always easy.
Yes.
One of the things that I really like is if you have every month, you can put in plain vanilla envelope,
Yes.
all your stuff for the month.
Yeah.
Um, and then you just have it there, or some other way of measuring things, keeping things. My chair just slipped. Sorry about that.
It's
It's
okay.
still,
I'm sitting on a yoga ball chair, and I will tell you, more often than not, it tries to slide out from under me.
yeah.
So you're
Well,
in
mine
good
just did
company.
that hydraulic thing where it went.
What
I don't really understand it because sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Um, yeah, so we really just need to keep things in order as best we can, so it's not a disaster at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Um, and also, then you can do some of the tax planning as the year goes. Like if you have no idea, you're like, well, I've got all kinds of money in the bank. That's an indicator that you're doing well and that you probably should make some estimated tax payments. If
Got
you
it.
have no money in the bank, but but the reason you have no money in the bank is you've taken it all in draw, well, that's the same as having income. So then you've kind of shot yourself in the foot a little bit in that you do need to make estimated payments, but you feel like you're broke. Well, maybe you're broke because you're taking too much out of the business and you need to leave a little more in. I mean, you really need to consider not either leaving or putting aside a quarter to a third of your income for taxes,
Wow.
because
That's a big
it's
number.
it's huge. It's a huge number. But you're going to pay, 11 to 12% in Medicare and Social Security tax for self-employment tax. I mean, that's big. It's a big
Yeah.
chunk, plus whatever your tax rate is. And again,
Right.
you have to consider that some of this, if you have a spouse and your spouse is making money, your tax rate isn't going to be 12%. It's going to
Right.
be 20 something percent. So that's
Right.
why, and there's the state tax, which again, if you're making money, then, you really do need to allow for that, because the last thing we want is the year end to come. And by year end, I mean April 15th.
Right.
And you're like, oh gosh, I've got a tax bill and I have no way to pay it.
Right.
Because
Right.
interestingly, the IRS doesn't love that. And
No,
neither does New
shocking.
Jersey.
No one
Um,
doesn't like no one likes not getting paid.
yeah.
So with the few minutes that we have left, I want to leave it on a happier note. So so we've talked about LLCs, S corps, we've talked about W-2s, 1099s, we've talked about organization and keeping on tabs of things monthly as you're going through them so that you remember. I know for me at the end of the year, even though I have a Google spreadsheet, but even though I have an idea of my expenses and my income, I won't remember what a certain deposit that I made into my bank account may not have come from, if it came from like a paper check, right? Something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, or it
Yeah.
was a transfer in. And so I
Yeah.
think the monthly thing, like while it's fresh in your mind, like that's a
Mm-hmm.
great idea. Go through your
Yep.
bank statement, anything that came in. What was that? Oh, this is what it was. Make a note of it so that you kind of stay on top of it. Is there a happy tax tip or like a relief or like what's the opposite that you can share with us of 25 to 30% of your business income being given away to taxes?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but I remember years and years ago reading a quote by Malcolm Forbes. And Malcolm Forbes said, why would you work 40 hours a week for somebody else when you can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for yourself? I mean, you can do anything you want in your own business. You
Yeah.
can work it a lot, you can work it a little. You know, one of the things that I was going to touch on today was, there's resources out there too for helping get started. I know that some of the county colleges have resource centers. There's organizations that help women get started.
Yep.
I mean, it's out there. We just have to take advantage of it and use it.
Yeah. So do your research, stay informed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I love that quote, and I'm a firm believer in it. I have worked for others, and I've worked for myself, and I usually do a little bit of both. So I think that resonates very, very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, before we wrap things up, would you like to share for people that are in the state of New Jersey, right? Because that's where we are, that may want to pick your brain, have a business startup conversation, or a year-end tax call with you. Now that your busy season is slightly behind you, please do share your contact information for our listeners.
Right. So the best way to get in touch with me is to send me an email, and my email is sgoodhandcpa, and that's just at gmail.com.
Perfect.
And I don't always get back to people in a day, especially if it's not, a client that is existing. But definitely happy to have a conversation with pretty much anyone. No charge for a, startup conversation. I'm really just like helping people in general, especially young people and women. I mean, I definitely just really think knowledge is power, and we 100%. Need to help people get it moving as best we can.
I love that. Susan, thank you so much. Don't be afraid of your taxes. It's what we're gonna leave everybody with. And Susan is here to help you and hold your hand through the fire, if you will. But get up and face your fears, I think, is the most important thing, because it's not as scary as you can make it out to be. And I think that's the most important thing to take away.
Definitely not as scary.
Yes.
With a couple of tips and tricks, we can make it a lot more pleasant.
Yes. Yeah. So with that said, I just want to share how much I appreciate each and every one of you for sharing this space with us today, and ask that you please feel free to share the same with your loved ones. For more goodness, follow me on all the socials at Above the Ground Podcast, and visit my website, airsaboveyoga.com. As always, don't forget to check out my other episodes and all of my amazing sisters at the Divas That Care Network. You can find us on Spotify, Odyssey, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, or anywhere else you may feel guided. Again, my name is Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground Podcast, where every day is a good one.